Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm here again with a brand new story. Enjoy the story, and don't forget to share your valuable thoughts in the comments.
They said the desert never forgets. Not the footsteps of lost travelers, not the whispers buried beneath its sand, and certainly not the secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. In the heart of northern Africa, far beyond the reach of modern cities and satellite signals, lies a region so isolated that even local tribes refuse to speak its name after sunset. It is not marked clearly on most maps. Some call it a dead zone, others call it cursed. But for a small team of researchers from the United States, it was simply Site K-47. The mission was straightforward on paper. A joint expedition between historians, archaeologists, and environmental scientists had been granted limited access to a remote stretch of desert after satellite scans revealed unusual underground formations, perfectly symmetrical structures buried deep beneath layers of sand. At first, the assumption was simple: an ancient lost civilization. Africa is, after all, home to some of the oldest and most mysterious human settlements ever discovered. Entire cities have been swallowed by time before. So when the data came in, showing unnatural geometric patterns, it sparked global interest. Leading the expedition was Dr. Ethan Carter, a seasoned archaeologist known for his work on forgotten settlements. With him were 6 others: a geologist, a linguist, a drone specialist, a medic, and 2 local guides. They arrived in late October. The heat was still brutal during the day, but nights turned cold quickly. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, golden waves under a burning sky. No birds, no insects, no signs of life. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Even deserts have sound, Sarah had said on the second day. Wind, insects, something. But here, there was nothing, just silence. They set up base camp near the coordinates indicated by satellite data. The ground looked ordinary, dry, cracked, lifeless. But as soon as they began scanning beneath the surface, the anomalies became undeniable. Perfect squares, aligned corridors, and something deeper, something massive. On the 3rd day, they began digging. At first, it was slow work. Layers of compacted sand and rock resisted them, but by evening, one of the workers struck something solid, not stone, not metal. It was smooth, too smooth. They cleared more of it, revealing a flat surface unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't eroded, it wasn't cracked, it looked untouched, as if time itself had avoided it. By the 5th day, they uncovered what appeared to be the top of a structure, a massive buried complex. The entrance wasn't obvious, but there were faint markings etched into the surface. That's when Daniel stepped in. "These symbols," he muttered, brushing sand away carefully. "They're not like anything I've seen." They weren't hieroglyphics, not Arabic, not tribal markings. They were geometric, repeating patterns, almost mathematical in nature, and they seemed to shift depending on how the light hit them. At first, they thought it was a trick of the sun, but it wasn't. At certain angles, the symbols appeared to rearrange themselves. That night, no one slept well. The wind had picked up, but it didn't sound natural. It carried a low, almost humming tone, like a distant machine running beneath the earth. The next morning, they found the entrance. It wasn't a door in the traditional sense, more like a seam in the surface that slowly revealed itself as they cleared more debris. A narrow opening descending into darkness. Cool air flowed out from inside, not stale, not suffocating, fresh. "How's that possible?" Sarah asked. No one answered. They geared up and entered. The descent was gradual at first, a sloping corridor that extended far deeper than expected. Their lights illuminated smooth walls covered with those same shifting symbols. But the deeper they went, the stranger things became. The temperature stabilized, the air felt controlled, and the silence, it was gone. In its place was that same low hum, constant, rhythmic, alive. After nearly an hour of descending, they reached the first chamber. It was enormous, far larger than the structure should have allowed based on satellite scans. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into darkness. The walls curved in unnatural ways, forming shapes that didn't seem to obey normal architectural logic. And in the center of the room stood a single object, a pillar. Tall, black, and perfectly smooth. No seams, no markings, just there. "What is this place?" one of the team whispered. No one had an answer. They approached the pillar cautiously. As they got closer, the humming grew louder, not painfully so, but noticeable, almost like it was reacting to them. Ethan reached out. "Wait," Sarah said, but it was too late. The moment his hand touched the surface, everything changed. The hum stopped, the lights flickered, and for a split second, just a fraction of time, the entire room went completely dark. When the lights came back on, the symbols on the walls had changed. Not shifted, changed, completely different patterns. Daniel stumbled back. That's not possible, but it was happening right in front of them. Then came the sound. Not the hum, not the wind, something else. Footsteps, echoing from deeper within the structure. Slow, measured, and definitely not theirs. "Everyone, lights off," Ethan whispered. They obeyed. Darkness swallowed the chamber. The footsteps continued, closer, closer. Then they stopped, right at the edge of the room. No one breathed, no one moved. Minutes passed, then nothing. The sound was gone. When they turned the lights back on, the entrance they had come through was no longer there. Just a solid wall. The same smooth surface, no seam, no opening. They were trapped. Panic set in quickly. They searched the perimeter, scanning, tapping, trying to find any sign of the corridor. Nothing. "It's like it sealed itself," the drone specialist said. Ethan remained calm. There has to be another way out.
They began exploring deeper. What they found defied everything they thought they knew about history. Rooms that seemed to rearrange themselves. Corridors that led back to places they hadn't entered yet. Walls that pulsed faintly, as if alive. And everywhere, those symbols. Watching, changing, learning. On the second night inside, something happened to Daniel. He had been studying the symbols obsessively, sketching them, trying to decode their patterns. "I think it's a language," he said at one point, "but not like ours. It's reactive." That night, he disappeared. No sound, no struggle, just gone. They searched for hours. Nothing. But in one of the deeper chambers, they found new symbols on the wall. Symbols that hadn't been there before. And among them, a pattern that looked disturbingly like a human figure. Daniel. Or something like him. From that point on, things escalated. The structure began to respond to them more aggressively. Lights malfunctioned, equipment failed, the air grew heavier, and the footsteps returned. More frequent now, sometimes accompanied by whispers, not in any known language, but somehow understandable. "Leave. You don't belong. Not yet." The team began to fracture. Fear took hold. One of the guides refused to go further and stayed behind in a chamber. The next morning, he was gone. No trace, just more symbols, more patterns, more records. Ethan started to realize something horrifying. "This place isn't a ruin," he said quietly. "It's active. It's recording us, studying us, maybe even recreating us." The pillar in the main chamber became their focus again. It seemed to be the center, the control point. If there was a way out, it had to be there. They returned. The room had changed. The pillar was no longer alone. There were now 6 smaller pillars surrounding it, one for each of them. Except there were only 5 people left. As they approached, the hum returned, louder than ever. The symbols on the floor began to glow faintly, and then the pillars activated. Light erupted from their surfaces, forming shapes in the air. Not random shapes, human forms, exact replicas, moving, breathing, watching. Each member of the team stared at their own double, perfect in every detail, except for one thing: the eyes. They were empty. Ethan stepped back. This isn't possible. But it was. The structure wasn't just recording them, it was replicating them, understanding them, and maybe replacing them. Suddenly, one of the replicas moved independently, not mirroring, acting. It stepped forward and spoke. "Integration incomplete." The voice was distorted, layered, not human. "Subject instability detected." Then all the replicas turned their heads at the same time toward the real team. Correction required. What happened next was chaos. Lights exploded, the ground trembled, the replicas advanced, and the structure reacted. Corridors shifted, walls closed in. The team ran, desperately searching for an exit, any exit. Sarah was the last to see Ethan. He turned back toward the pillar. "I think I can shut it down," he shouted. "Go!" She hesitated, but then the walls began to close, and she had no choice. She ran, through corridors that twisted and changed, through rooms that shouldn't exist, until, suddenly, she saw light, real light, the desert sun. She stumbled out of the structure, collapsing onto the sand, gasping, alone. Behind her, there was nothing, no entrance, no structure, just endless desert. The expedition was declared a failure. Officially, it was written off as a lost team due to environmental conditions. But Sarah knew the truth. She tried to tell them. No one believed her. Months later, satellite scans of the region showed nothing unusual. No structures, no anomalies, just desert. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah hears it, that low, rhythmic hum. And in her dreams, she sees the symbols, changing, watching, waiting. Because somewhere beneath the sands of Africa, something ancient is still active, still learning, still building. And maybe
Months passed after the official report was closed. But in archaeology, nothing truly closes. It just gets buried deeper. Sarah tried to return to normal life in the United States. She gave interviews at first, but they were quickly dismissed. The footage she brought back was labeled equipment malfunction. Her recordings of the humming sound were called audio interference. And the sketches Daniel made? Lost in transit. That was the official explanation. But Sarah knew better, because one thing remained with her that no one could take away. A fragment. Not physical, mental. The symbols. She saw them everywhere now, in reflections, in static on screens, even in the pattern of rain on glass. At first, she thought it was trauma, psychological stress, the brain trying to make sense of something it couldn't process. But then the nightmares changed. They stopped being dreams and started becoming structured, like messages. At exactly 3:17 a.m. every night, she would wake up at the same moment. Always the same sound. The hum, low, rhythmic, coming from somewhere she couldn't locate. One night, she decided to record it. She placed her phone beside her bed and forced herself to sleep. At 3:17 a.m., she woke again. But this time, she didn't move. She waited. The hum began, faint at first, then clearer. She grabbed her phone and hit record. What happened next changed everything, because in the recording, there was more than sound. There was speech. Not English, not any human language, but underneath it, patterns, repeating sequences, the same structure she had seen in the underground facility. Her hands started shaking. She replayed it again and again, and slowly, painfully, she noticed something. It wasn't random, it was mathematical, a structured transmission, like data being sent through vibration. That's when she realized something horrifying. The structure wasn't gone. It had followed her. Or more accurately, she had carried part of it back, not physically, but cognitively, as if something inside her mind had been tagged, a signal, a link, and it was still active. 3 days later, she received an email. No sender, no subject line, just a single attachment, a video file. The file name was K47 Return Protocol. Her stomach dropped instantly. She didn't open it, not immediately. She tried Ethan's old emergency contact instead. Disconnected. She tried the geologist. No response. The linguist's university confirmed he had never returned from Africa, officially. But Sarah remembered. He had vanished inside the structure. Still, the file remained, waiting. That night, she made a decision she would later regret. She opened it. The video began with static, then darkness, then the desert, the exact same region. But the camera angle was wrong. It was too stable, too precise, as if not filmed by a human. The footage moved underground, into the structure, the same corridors, the same chamber, but now it was active again, fully illuminated, and the pillars were there, but something was different. They were not empty. Inside each pillar was movement, human-shaped silhouettes, struggling, and then she saw it. Ethan, or what looked like him, but his face wasn't stable. It shifted between expressions, like multiple versions of him were overlapping. The video zoomed closer, and then the voice returned, not through audio, but directly in her mind. Subject return confirmed. Sarah dropped the phone, but the sound didn't stop. It was inside her head now. Days later, strange things began happening around her apartment. Electronics turning on by themselves, lights flickering in sequences, patterns forming in condensation on mirrors, always the same symbols. She tried to leave, but every time she packed her bag, she forgot why or where she was going. Her memory started to fragment, not completely, just enough. Like something was editing her thoughts, removing key pieces, until one morning she woke up and found sand in her shoes. She froze. That was impossible. She hadn't been anywhere near a desert, but the sand was real, warm, fine, African desert sand. That's when the knocking started, at her door, slow, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. She didn't answer. The knocking stopped. Silence returned.
Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated and answered. No voice at first, just the hum. Then a familiar sound, a human voice layered beneath it. Ethan's voice. Sarah? She nearly dropped the phone. Don't trust the surface, he said. What? They didn't escape. What are you talking about? A pause, then something chilling. They adapted. The line went silent for a second, then continued. But you brought it back. Her breathing stopped. I didn't bring anything back. A faint sound, almost like laughter. No, the voice said. You are the return path. The call ended. That night, Sarah made her final attempt to escape. She went to the airport, booked the earliest flight anywhere. But at security, something happened. Her passport wouldn't scan. The system flagged her, not as invalid, but as incomplete. Security officers looked confused. They scanned again. Same result. Ma'am, your identity record is inconsistent. That was the moment she understood. She wasn't fully her anymore. Something inside the structure had marked her, or rewritten part of her existence. She left the airport in a panic, and that's when she saw it. Across the street, a man standing still, watching her. Ethan, or something that looked like him. But his eyes, they were the same as the replicas. Empty, reflective, not human. He didn't move his lips, but she heard him anyway, not with sound, but inside her mind. It's already mapped you. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. That night, Sarah made her final decision. If the structure was trying to complete something through her, then she would find it first. She began studying everything she could find. Old satellite data, redacted expedition logs, even ancient African tribal records translated into English. And slowly, a pattern emerged. The structure wasn't a ruin. It wasn't even a machine. It was something else entirely. A mapping intelligence. Not built, not alive, but something in between, designed to record consciousness itself. Not just physical bodies, but thought patterns, memory structures, identity, and then replicate them elsewhere, across unknown distances. The desert site was just a node, a relay point, a transfer station. And Sarah, she was now part of its network. One night, she found something buried in classified archives, a single line from a decommissioned military report. Subject exposure does not end at exit. It continues propagation. Her hands went cold. Propagation. Not infection, not contamination. Propagation. She wasn't the end of it. She was the beginning. That night, the humming stopped for the first time. Complete silence. Sarah sat in her room frozen. Something was wrong. Too wrong. Silence meant absence, and absence meant completion. Then her phone lit up. A message, no number, just text. Final integration phase initiated. Her lights shut off. The room went dark, and for the first time, she heard something outside her window. Not footsteps, not wind, but sand, moving upward, against gravity. Forming shapes, symbols, outside her window, writing itself across the glass, slowly, carefully, as if something on the other side was finishing a long calculation. And then the glass cracked, not outward,
not inward, but in a geometric pattern, exactly like the symbols. And in that final moment, Sarah understood the truth. The African structure wasn't discovered, it was activated, and it didn't choose them by accident. It chose them because it had been waiting for enough minds to map, enough consciousness to complete its pattern. And now, the pattern was done. The last thing she saw before everything changed was her reflection in the glass. But it wasn't alone anymore. Something stood behind her reflection, smiling, not with a mouth, but with structure. And then everything went silent.